On the edge of a small mountain town where winters could turn fierce overnight and where the roads often vanished under blankets of heavy snow, there lived a kind old lady named Martha, a widow in her late 70s whose heart had never hardened despite years of hardship and loneliness, and though her little wooden cottage was modest, built decades ago by her late husband with his bare hands, it was always filled with warmth, freshly baked bread, and the smell of burning pinewood in her fireplace, a beacon of comfort for anyone who happened to pass by. But nobody, not even Martha herself, could have predicted that one fateful evening during a blizzard she would find herself face to face with 15 leather-clad, tattooed, intimidating-looking Hell's Angels bikers who, drenched from the storm and shivering despite their tough appearances, knocked on her door seeking shelter from the merciless cold. Martha, without hesitation, opened her door wide, her wrinkled face breaking into a smile as she invited them in, offering them the fire's warmth and hot cocoa without a single thought of fear or judgment, for she had always believed that kindness costs nothing but can mean everything, and the bikers, though rough around the edges, were taken aback by her generosity, for most people crossed the street to avoid them, but here was this frail grandmotherly figure treating them as though they were her own children returning home after a long journey. They stomped off the snow from their boots, filled her small living room with the scent of wet leather and gasoline, and though their loud voices and rough laughter rattled her fragile shelves, Martha fussed over them as if they were honored guests, serving soup from her tiny pot, pulling extra blankets from the closet, and insisting they dry their gloves and jackets by the fire. And as the hours passed, the bikers, who at first were restless and loud, slowly softened, telling her about the miles they had traveled, the families they had left behind, the trouble they had faced on the road, and Martha, listening with the patience of someone who had lived long enough to understand that every soul carried both light and shadow, nodded and smiled, offering gentle words that felt like balm on scars they rarely revealed to strangers. And though the storm howled outside, inside that little cottage grew a sense of peace none of them had expected, for these men who were used to being judged and feared suddenly felt like sons again, cared for without strings attached. By morning, the snow had stopped but lay piled high against the door, and the bikers, unwilling to leave without repaying Martha's kindness, shoveled her walkway, chopped extra wood for her fireplace, and promised they would never forget what she had done for them. Yet Martha only waved them off, reminding them that kindness was not a debt to be repaid but a seed to be planted, and so they rode off into the crisp morning, their roaring engines echoing through the valley as Martha returned to her simple chores, thinking little of it, but what she didn't know was that word of her hospitality spread quickly among the Hell's Angels chapters across the state, and less than a week later, on a quiet morning when Martha was sweeping her porch, she heard a distant rumble that grew louder and louder until the ground itself seemed to shake, and when she looked up, she saw a line of motorcycles stretching farther than her eyes could see. Over 100 gleaming chrome beasts, one after another, pulling up in front of her little house, their riders dismounting in perfect formation, leather jackets shining under the pale sun, each man and woman carrying bags of groceries, bundles of firewood, and supplies of every kind, their intimidating presence now transformed into a show of loyalty, gratitude, and respect for the woman who had sheltered their brothers during the storm, and Martha, overwhelmed, pressed a trembling hand to her chest as the leader of the group, a towering man with a thick beard and tattoos curling up his neck, knelt before her and said in a voice gruff with emotion, "Ma'am, you showed us love when the world only shows us fear. From now on, your family, and we take care of our own." And before she knew it, her yard was buzzing with bikers repairing her fence, patching her roof, stacking firewood higher than she had ever seen, while others filled her pantry until it overflowed, and one even knelt to fix the loose leg on her rocking chair, all the while calling her, Mama Martha, with a tenderness that belied their fearsome reputations. Neighbors peeked through curtains, stunned to see what looked like an outlaw army treating the old widow's home as sacred ground, and whispers spread through town, turning into headlines in local papers, then across the state, until people everywhere were moved by the story of the grandmother who had tamed the Hell's Angels with nothing but kindness. And in the weeks that followed, Martha's life transformed, for not only did the bikers return often to check on her, bringing gifts and laughter, but they also began volunteering at the town's shelters, donating food to the church pantry, and even escorting school buses safely during icy mornings, all because one old woman had reminded them of their better selves, showing them that beneath their leather and chains, they were still men and women capable of love and loyalty. Martha never sought recognition, she simply kept her door and her heart open, but the bond that grew between her and the Hells Angels became legendary, an unbreakable reminder that sometimes the roughest exteriors guard the softest hearts, and that one act of kindness in the middle of a storm can ripple outward to change lives in ways we could never imagine. And as the years passed, Martha grew frailer, her steps slower, yet every birthday her yard filled once again with the roar of engines and the laughter of men who once were feared but now were her protectors, carrying cakes, flowers, and even handmade cards signed, "Love, your boys." And when townsfolk asked her if she had ever been afraid that night when she let them in, she would simply smile and say, "Fear closes doors, but love opens them. Always open your door," and those words lived on long after, carried on the wind along with the thunder of 100 motorcycles that lined up, year after year, at the doorstep of the kind old lady whose warmth lit the coldest nights. Powerful call to action use after the story ends. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away, share it with someone who still believes in kindness. And if you want more real stories that prove love and humanity can break every barrier, make sure you subscribe right now and be part of this journey. The next story might change the way you see the world.